At dawn, over the Baltic, Russian air defense radars began lighting up one after another. What they didn't know was that 15 low-flying drones, each no larger than a compact car, had crossed nearly 1,000 km of hostile airspace, headed straight for one of Russia's most critical energy arteries, the port of Luga. It was supposed to be impenetrable. That morning it became a battlefield. At 6:15 a.m. local time, a formation of 15 Ukrainian long-range drones entered the Gulf of Finland, flying barely above the waves. Their target, Luga, Russia's largest Baltic port, handled billions of dollars worth of refined petroleum and liquefied gas exports every month. Moscow had ringed it with surface-to-air missiles, radar stations, and electronic warfare vehicles. On paper, it was untouchable. In practice, Ukraine was about to challenge that assumption. The drones, Ukrainian-made UJ-26 Beaver strike models, had launched from secret sites in central Ukraine nearly 8 hours earlier. They'd flown more than 960 km through the night, guided by satellite and inertial navigation, their small engines running hot and fuel tanks near empty. Operators in hardened bunkers near Kiev watched through grainy satellite relays as the formation neared the target zone. Everything appeared normal until a Russian patrol boat emerged through the morning fog below them. The formation leader immediately veered hard to the right as 14 5mm machine gun tracers cut through the air. The Russian crew had spotted movement in the haze and opened fire. Streams of glowing rounds swept across the drone's path, missing by meters, close enough that had there been human pilots, they would have felt the pressure shock of passing bullets. The patrol boat crew fired 3 Igla-S shoulder-launched missile systems meant for helicopters and low-flying aircraft, hoping their heat, seeking guidance, could lock onto the small engines. The missiles streaked upward into the gray sky. One lost lock and spiraled into the sea. Another detonated in open air between drones, its proximity fuse triggered by nothing. The third connected, shredding the trailing drone in a brief orange flash. 14 survivors regrouped and pressed onward, now just 40 km from the Russian coast. That was when a much more serious threat came online. An S-400 Triumph air defense battery positioned inland activated its gravestone radar. For several minutes, it had been silently tracking the incoming formation, but only now did it switch from search mode to fire control. The Ukrainian drones were within engagement range. The S-400 system is among Russia's most advanced, capable of tracking hundreds of targets simultaneously and striking aircraft 400 km away. But against these drones, it faced a challenge it was never designed for. The Beaver drones were made from lightweight fiberglass and carbon composites, materials that reflect only a fraction of the radar energy that metallic aircraft do. To the radar operators, the swarm appeared smaller than a flock of birds. The Russian operator attempted a lock anyway. The S-400 emits a focused 3 GHz radar beam, measuring the reflection to calculate range and trajectory, essentially a radio-based form of sonar, but the weak reflections gave inconsistent readings. The target icons on his display flickered, barely registering above background noise. So he switched tactics, launching missiles first, hoping their onboard seekers would provide more accurate data in flight. 248 N-6DM missiles, each worth around $2 million, blasted off their launch rails, leaving white contrails across the dawn sky, designed to destroy fighter jets and cruise missiles. They accelerated toward the low-flying targets, but the drones had already dropped altitude, skimming just 10 m above the Baltic Sea. At such low altitude, the missiles' control fins began to stall. Their aerodynamic surfaces couldn't generate enough lift to maneuver at the steep dive angles required. Both missiles lost stability and plunged into the water. The S-400 crew quickly switched to a different weapon, the 9M96E2. A smaller missile with gas dynamic thrusters that could pivot mid-flight without relying on airflow. These weapons could perform 90-degree turns and endure forces up to 60 gs, ideal for low-altitude chases. The first 9M96 missile locked on, closing the distance at supersonic speed. The lead Beaver tried to evade, banking hard left, but the missile seeker adjusted instantly. 3 seconds to impact, then a bright detonation. Hundreds of tungsten fragments ripped through the drone's carbon fiber fuselage, scattering debris across the sea. A second missile destroyed another drone moments later, but the destruction created a side effect that the Russians hadn't anticipated. The fragments and debris generated false radar echoes, confusing their systems with hundreds of ghost targets. For a brief window, the survivors vanished from radar, disappearing into the clutter. 13 drones remained, and now the port's close, range defenses were prepared to engage. Russia had deployed multiple Panzer as systems around Luga, forming overlapping fields of fire known as a bot. Each Panzer combines radar-guided missiles with twin 30mm cannons capable of 5.0 rounds per minute. They serve as the last line of defense when long-range systems fail. The first Panzer locked onto the approaching formation and fired a 50-76 missile at the lead drone. In response, the Ukrainians executed a pre-programmed wagon wheel maneuver, rotating around a central axis while advancing. This constant shifting of angles confused the missile's guidance algorithm, which relies on predicting target motion. The missile overshot and self-destructed. Switching tactics, the Russian gunner opened up with his twin cannons, saturating the air with explosive shells. Instead of aiming precisely, he filled a cubic volume of sky with lead, a beaten zone. 4 drones entered that space, 2 emerged on the other side. Now only 9 drones remained. By this point, Russian regional command centers across Leningrad Oblast were flashing red. Simultaneous attacks were unfolding across western Russia in Kursk, Bryansk, and Rostov. Every air defense unit was already engaged. The Luga garrison would receive no reinforcements. The 9 surviving beavers pressed on, approaching from the southwest. Ahead of them sat one of the most sophisticated electronic warfare systems in Russia's arsenal, the Kasuka-4. Externally, the Kasuka looks like an ordinary shipping container mounted on a truck. Internally, it's packed with over $20 million worth of jamming electronics designed to blind radar and sever communication links. As the drones closed to within 30 km, the system activated, unleashing a storm of electromagnetic interference across frequencies from 1, 2 to 5, 8 gigahertz. The operators employed a sweep and dwell method, scanning rapidly to locate active signals, then concentrating all power on those frequencies. Within seconds, they detected transmissions near 2, 4 gigahertz and focused a powerful 20W beam in that band. Normally, that would sever the remote control link instantly, but these Ukrainian drones weren't relying solely on static radio channels. They were using frequency-hopping spread spectrum, shifting between 128 encrypted channels every second in a pattern known only to the drone's onboard processor and the control station in Ukraine. To jam it completely, the Russians would need to blanket the entire spectrum at once. They switched to barrage jamming, flooding every frequency simultaneously. Even that didn't stop the beavers. Losing connection to their operators, the drones automatically switched to autonomous navigation using terrain contour matching preloaded maps, compared radar altimeter data against stored elevation profiles. Every road, bridge, and structure between the launch point and target had been programmed months in advance. The drones could navigate without GPS or radio links. However, autonomy had risks. 3 drones crashed into a newly constructed crane on the outskirts of Luga, an obstacle not present in their outdated terrain database. The collisions were instantaneous and catastrophic. The drones' carbon fiber frames no match for steel and DAD. 6 drones continued, but their batteries were nearly drained, less than 20% remaining. There would be no second attempt. At the same time, the S-400 commander faced his own problem. Each remaining missile in his inventory cost millions. The drones they faced cost about $35,000 apiece. Even if every engagement succeeded, Russia would lose the exchange financially. He ordered his crews to switch to older, cheaper weapons, Zu-23 anti-aircraft guns dating from the 1960s. These manually aimed cannons used optical sights, not radar. Gunners had to visually spot the targets. No easy task with small drones darting at 150 km/h. The operators fired blind, filling the sky with tracers. By sheer luck, 1 drone was struck mid-roll, breaking apart in midair. 5 remained, As the survivors neared the port, the environment turned against both sides. The morning fog that had concealed the drones earlier thickened again. As the sun warmed the air, visibility dropped to less than 30 m. Radar and thermal sensors alike became unreliable. The defenders switched to firing at predicted approach paths, creating walls of projectiles at GPS coordinates where they expected the drones to appear. The beavers descended to just 3 m above the water. Salt spray coated their sensors, turning their camera feeds into a gray blur. The operators in Kiev could see nothing but static. The drones were flying blind, guided solely by coordinates. Desperate, Russian defenders activated GPS spoofers, transmitting false satellite signals to confuse navigation systems. 2 drones followed the fake coordinates and banked sharply into the water. 3 remained. These final drones relied on inertial navigation, gyroscopes, and accelerometers that estimated position without external signals. As they crossed into the port perimeter, Russian security forces armed with Igla-S missiles took positions on rooftops. These missiles used infrared seekers tuned to detect heat differences of half a degree against the warm fog and cool engines of the beavers. Lock-on was difficult. One finally achieved a lock, detonating close enough to shred control surfaces. The drone spiraled down and crashed into a storage area to left. Music and my 8 helicopter joined the defense, its gunners firing PKM machine guns through the fog. The rotor's downwash 60 km/h of turbulence knocked one drone off course, but it also momentarily cleared the fog, giving the other drone a brief visual of its target, the cryogenic gas processing complex at Luga. Automatic safety systems at the facility detected unauthorized aircraft and triggered emergency venting. Massive quantities of methane and ethane were released to prevent overpressure in the tanks, an action that unintentionally filled the air with a highly flammable vapor cloud. Fire crews deployed industrial water cannons, each capable of punching through wood at 50 m. One drone was caught in a water jet, shattered, and fell harmlessly onto concrete. The final drone, the 15th launch, the 6th survivor, and now the only one left, locked its thermal sensor onto a target colder than anything else in the area, the minus 63 degrees C cryogenic fractionation unit. Switching to manual control via Iridium satellite, the operator accepted a 2-con delay in command response. Battery at 12%. The drone maneuvered through the maze of pipes and tanks, its small electric motor whining as it burned the last of its power. Russian troops fired rifles blindly. A shotgun pellet shattered the camera lens. The operator continued by telemetry alone, altitude, speed, and bearing updating every 2 seconds. Battery at 8%, altitude 3 m, speed 40 km/h. The drone dove toward the target, using gravity to maintain speed as its motors lost thrust. Below, invisible methane mixed with ethane and propane, forming an explosive mist. The drone's 20 kg thermite warhead, iron oxide, and aluminum powder was set to detonate on impact, burning at over 500 degrees, battery 5%, motors failing. The operator pushed the nose down, the signal froze, power lost, but momentum carried at the last 50 m. The beaver hit the base of the fractionation column precisely where intended. For a moment there was silence, then a white-hot flare burst from the impact point. The thermite burned through the steel wall in 2 seconds. Pressurized liquid hydrocarbons vaporized, causing a pressure shock that ruptured nearby pipelines. The released gases ignited instantly. The first explosion tore through the complex at 30 m/s, shattering windows for Killam. The resulting fireball rose over 200 m into the air, visible from across the Gulf. Then came secondary explosions, a chain reaction of rupturing cryogenic vessels, each one depressurized violently, expanding 600 times its volume in seconds. The cascade obliterated the facility. Within minutes, the $2 billion gas processing hub was gone. Twisted metal and burning debris where one of Russia's most secure energy installations had stood. The fires would burn for 6 days, visible from satellites over Estonia and Finland. For Ukraine, it marked the deepest successful strike into Russian territory yet, achieved not with missiles or bombers, but with small, relatively cheap drones that had outsmarted and outlasted one of the world's most complex air defense networks. The strike on Luga wasn't just a tactical success. It demonstrated a shift in modern warfare, where cost, autonomy, and precision increasingly matter more than size or range. And somewhere in a bunker near Kiev, the operators watched their telemetry feed go dark, knowing their last drone had reached its mark.